Hi, Acadiana. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. Monday afternoon, and Tropical Storm Rafael is our latest named storm. I got the upgrade during the 3 o'clock advisory, now at 15.5 north and 76.7 west. Winds are up to 45 miles per hour and the pressure's dropped to 997. Far on the left there, that is your Tuesday forecast. We'll hit the mid 80s with a chance for some scattered showers and thunderstorms. But we're going to focus on Rafael. There it is in the western part of the Caribbean Sea. Reconnaissance aircraft have been out here most of the afternoon, and we're starting to see a lot more thunderstorm activity kind of wrapping around the center, and the Recon aircraft showing 45-mile-per-hour winds now, which does indeed make it a tropical storm. So Rafael is the new name. There is a little closer view of that. And there are some indications as the western part of the Caribbean right now is experiencing some lower wind shear, but we also have a lot of tropical cyclone heat potential on top of some very warm waters in the western part of the Caribbean Sea. So some indications are that we could see some fairly quick intensification here, maybe considering rapid intensification. But I don't want you to worry, because we're not talking about what we saw with Hurricane Milton back several weeks ago, where it went from a tropical storm to a Cat 5 in no time. This is not expected to be anything super strong, but it is forecast to be a hurricane, and that's why those hurricane warnings are up for the Cayman Islands, and hurricane watches are now posted for the western half of Cuba, and you've even got some tropical storm watches that have now been posted for parts of the Florida Keys as well, as this system is going to be passing those southern parts of the Gulf of Mexico as a hurricane. But the extended forecast, as you get down into the latter part of the week and the early part of the weekend, you can see there on that map that it downgrades to a tropical storm, but it's still offshore as we head into the early part of the weekend. And there's a lot of uncertainty on the forecast track beyond 3 days, and there's also a lot of uncertainty on the intensity forecast beyond 3 days. So after we get through to it, once it reaches Cuba, once it gets in the Gulf of Mexico, there are a lot of variables that will come into play. So this is the forecast model tracks, and you can see that everything's pretty much in agreement for the first 3 days. And then once you get it into the Gulf of Mexico, you've got some westward tracks, some northward tracks up toward the Florida Peninsula, or Florida Panhandle rather, and then you've also got some tracks that kind of drifted off toward the northwest toward Louisiana. But notice how you get out to day 5 and 6 and a lot of these models just kind of drop off. So there are some models that actually have this thing fizzling out before it reaches the Louisiana coastline. But look at some of the computer models here. When it comes to intensity, they've really kind of narrowed down into that tropical storm and low-end hurricane range. A lot more are in that low-end hurricane starting within the next 24 hours and then going out to day 3 or 4. And then you start to see things really start to drop off in days 4, 5, and even 6. And a lot of these don't take into consideration a landfall. This is still something that would be offshore. So right now it is forecast to be a hurricane, but it could also weaken as it moves into more unfavorable conditions across the central and northern part of the Gulf of Mexico. Just looking at the water temperatures over the western part of the Caribbean, everything is still well in the mid 80s. Now these are Celsius temperatures, so 26.5 is 80 degrees on this Fahrenheit scale. So you're looking down here in the central part of the Caribbean Sea, and you can see most of those water temperatures are in the 29 to 30 degree range. So you're talking about 85 to 88 degrees on our water temperatures here across the western part of the Caribbean. But then in the Gulf of Mexico, they start to drop closer to the 80 degree mark. And then where it's shaded in green here along the coast, the temperatures have dropped below the 80 degree mark. So that would inhibit any strengthening as it moves farther to the north, if it indeed gets that far. And the tropical cyclone heat potential is quite high. So this measures not just the temperature at the surface of the ocean, but also how warm those 80-degree waters go below the surface. So in the western part of the Caribbean, it can still churn up some pretty warm waters that are deep down below the surface. But then once you get into the Gulf of Mexico, loop current might have some indication of keeping it a hurricane for a while. But as it moves closer to any of the coasts around the Gulf of Mexico, we're probably going to be looking at either weakening or maintaining strength as those waters are considerably colder and there's not a lot of heat potential that's there either. On top of that, there is forecast to be quite a bit of wind shear across the northern Gulf Coast right now, where the tropical system is getting organized. We have light to moderate wind shear, but going into the latter part of the week, you can see that wind shear really starts to extend in the offshore waters as a trough digs across the west. And that should, depending on how strong this is, should tug it to the north. Now remember, if this is still a fairly weak system and it's not building high enough, these mid and upper level troughs aren't going to have really any effect on it, and that would drift it more off toward the west. But if it does strengthen somewhat more, it should be able to be influenced by those mid and upper level troughs, and then that would tug it a little bit farther toward the north. So that's what we're looking at when it comes to the possibility of development there. So again, we've got a tropical storm. The name is now Rafael, and it is forecast to strengthen into a hurricane before reaching parts of the Gulf of Mexico sometime by the middle part of next week. And if it were to move close to Louisiana, it wouldn't be until very late this weekend or late this week or possibly into the weekend. And right now, all indications are that we would see some weakening as it moves off toward the north. But there are no watches or warnings or any indications of any issues for us here locally, at least for the next 3 days. We need to start to pay more attention to it a little bit farther down the road. But as of now, it looks like that this would be a weaker system as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. So hopefully this won't be a major threat to the Louisiana coastline. Well, that's what I've got for you on this afternoon. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, turn on those notifications, and don't forget you can hear all of my forecasts on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, as well as Freedom 95.1. And if you get the chance, please check out my social media pages and give those a follow as well, both on Facebook and X. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. I hope you have a great rest of your Monday afternoon, and I'll have more on Let's Talk Tropics and Acadiana weather today, starting tomorrow morning at 7:30. See you then.